Put your oxygen mask on first before assisting others. Why? Because if you're passed out or dead, you can't help anyone else. If you're not focused on your physical health, your mental health, your emotional health, you can't be the best for others. You always kind of have that gut feel of either something's not just right or you're not willing to open yourself up entirely to an individual. We'll call that a yellow flag. Your work should just be a piece of your identity, not your entire identity, so that when you go through these losses, you'd be like, all right, I was the managing partner of this large financial firm, but that was just a piece of who I was. Your legacy is built every single moment of every day, not 30 years from today. It's in every interaction that you're having with a human being. It's happening right here, right now.
This is the Relentless Pursuit of Winning podcast, where we are here to educate, equip, and inspire people to build extraordinary companies. We're so glad you're here. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so that you can get updates every time we drop a new episode. Now, let's get it started. Welcome to another episode of the Relentless Pursuit of Winning podcast. My name is Rick Meekins. I am your host today. And in our studio, we have Josh Kosnick. How are you today?
Doing fantastic. Even better now speaking with you. So we're gonna have a great conversation today.
Oh man, you just made my day. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate it. And folks, again, welcome to the show. If you haven't done it already, I would be so grateful if you'd like, subscribe, hit the bell so you can get updates every time we drop a new episode. And without further ado, let's get into it. So Josh, tell us a little about who you are, what you do, and why you do what you do.
Well, I've been an entrepreneur since I was 24. So I sold my last big business in 2021. I'm sure we can get into that story in a bit. But what I found is that I grew up in a family of entrepreneurs. I became an entrepreneur, and it's one of the hardest things you can ever take on. And so one of the things, what I do now is help entrepreneurs have it a little bit simpler than I've had. So I usually find that most entrepreneurs have two major issues going on in the world, and then like 136 little issues underneath that. But the two major ones are human development, otherwise known as leadership, and the second one being systems and processes to help them scale and grow. So depending on, in a discovery call, depending on where their biggest bugaboo is, that's where we'll lead our conversations and where I can have most impact. So I want them to live their best life inside and outside of their business. And a lot of times most of the people that I'm working with have a very successful business, but something's missing.
Yeah. How do you define entrepreneurship first and foremost?
So I don't know that I've ever really thought about that term other than owning a business, leading and caring for other people that have chosen to align with your vision and outside of the corporate realm. So I always put out there, like, most people will never understand what it's like to be an entrepreneur.
hmm
There's solopreneurs that, you could put in the entrepreneur, but they don't have payroll and other people to worry about. An entrepreneur typically has employees, rent, or other expenses that are coming along with and responsibilities that are coming along with that. Say that you'll never understand what it's like to be an entrepreneur unless you've laid it awake at night wondering how you're going to make payroll or wondering how you're going to pay the bill in the morning, or had to sacrifice paying some of your own bills to make sure your people were paid. That's when you know you're a true entrepreneur.
I absolutely knew you were going to say that. That laying awake, it's like, dang, how am I going to make this work? That's always fun. That's always fun. Yeah, you've had an interesting history as an entrepreneur. And one of the things I like to do with the show is to show people or demonstrate or inspire people to keep going. This business, as you said, it's one of the hardest things you're ever going to do. And you've done the thing, and you had difficult times, and you came back. Now, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So, what's interesting is I think when people get into business, first of all, a lot of people will tell you you're crazy. You should get safe and go get a real job and collect that every other week paycheck or whatever it may be. And then all of a sudden you start having success, and then they're like, hey, I always knew you would be successful. I always believed in you. It's always funny how that always turns around. So I started in the financial planning world and very quickly hired my first associate at 25 years old. So I became a boss at that time, and then grew that practice to having a few employees that were helping me manage. And I was also mentoring and recruiting and leading other advisors. And so my first exit was actually a franchise that was outside the financial world, which was an Anytime Fitness, which are kind of all over the country now. But if there's not one in your area, it's probably very analogous to a 24/7, a Snap Fitness, something of that nature, a smaller gym that's open 24 hours a day. Second business I exited was my personal financial planning practice, because I was asked to take over over and buy out my father in a large firm that he had owned. And so I did that at age 35. And my plan from age 35 to 55 was to run that business, grow it as big as possible. But you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans. And
Mhm.
at 41, the rug was ripped out from underneath me. And I was asked to step down and they bought me out. And the circumstances around that, and I get raw with this story because it's real. Like, I always tell people it's very analogous to if you've ever ridden a motorcycle, there's a saying riding motorcycles. It's not if you put down the bike, but when.
Mhm.
It just is what it is. Well, in entrepreneurship or business, there's a similar saying that it's not a matter of if you get sued, but when.
Mhm.
And it's just we're in a very litigious society, and it is what it is. But and I got a lot to say about that, but I want to take up our time on that regard. In got through COVID in 2021, or in 2020 we were up 30%. Things were going amazingly well. In 2021, I had a leader on my team that was causing some issues, very narcissistic. I had some compliance issues. He had some people issues, and trying to correct those. But if you've ever dealt with a narcissist in your life,
Mhm.
trying to correct issues with narcissists is like trying to back a tiger into a cage, and it just does not go well. And so as I'm trying to correct behavior because I did care about him, but now also was looking out for the culture of my 250 person organization, instead of actually correcting the behavior, he decided to sue me. And
Mhm.
not only sue me from a business standpoint, but really slander my name because he sued me for discrimination. And now what was interesting about this story is that I played football with his father. I was the only white guy on that team. I hired him knowing he was a black man. I mentored him, taught him everything I knew, and
Mhm.
then turns around 4 years later and sues me for discrimination. Oh, and by the way, in the interim, promoted him to managing director underneath me. He was the youngest appointed African American managing director in the company history, and the company's 150 years old. So, in that to be said, then sues me for discrimination, not because I actually discriminated, but because I was trying to hold them accountable. So the company does their own research and kind of investigation. They knew I had done nothing wrong. They say they're going to help me out. And then a month later, they're like, just kidding. You're terminated. They didn't say this, but this is effectively what it was. We're getting ourselves out of this lawsuit because if you recall in 2020, 2021, that's when the George Floyd thing happened. That's when BLM happened. So it was hot press that if this had gotten out, they didn't want their name dragged through the mud.
Mhm.
So not only was my whole business taken away, my name was slandered, and I'm in the pits of despair. Now, anyone, it's interesting in that time frame. I think my wife was more worried about it than me, having people read that I was in a lawsuit for discrimination, because
Yeah.
anyone that knows me would know that's not me. And so I wasn't so worried about those that didn't know me and what they would think, but my wife was because she didn't want people thinking or speaking ill about her husband. But I was more worried about what am I going to do next? My dreams and purpose in life was just ripped away. And I've learned this over the last few years, but it doesn't matter if you have a happy exit with your business or a sad exit like I had, you go through the 5 stages of grief because you're giving up your baby. And so it's a tumultuous time regardless of how you exit your business because you look at, okay, what's my next purpose? Like, I don't feel like I'm not of use anymore. At that time, for me, I was 41 years old.
Mhm.
But even if someone like I've helped a couple others retire that are 60 or 70, they don't feel like they're done yet. But it's the smart decision to sell their business at that point. So you go through the 5 stages of grief just like you would losing a loved one. So I'll end there. There's a lot more to say, but I'm sure you got questions.
Yeah, the biggest question that jumps out to me is how do you deal with that? I mean, you talk about going through the 5 stages, but I mean, this is your identity.
Yeah.
As we alluded to, that's being stripped from you, and you needed to come back from that. And this is something that happens. So, what was your process? How did you work through it?
Yeah, I don't know that there's a right or wrong way, but you gotta go through it. What I will start with is you gotta go through it. But, stuff happens, like, you could get sued for wrongful termination, you could get sued for a lot of different things. Someone slips and falls on your property and you're sued, right? So, there's a lot of different things that can tear you down, but you gotta walk through the fire. So, for me, the biggest blessing in disguise, because it didn't seem like a blessing at the time, was there was a 6-month period where I was negotiating my exit with my former firm, and it's a Fortune 100 company, multi-billion dollar behemoth. So lawyers going back and forth. And so I had made a quick decision that I was not going to make any quick decisions because I was getting recruited by everyone in the financial industry. I'm not going to make a quick decision. I'm going to spend the summer with my kids and my wife. And like, when else would I have that time back? So I did that and we had a great summer. But then I get them into school. And like you said, your identity, your purpose is stripped. I'm a type A individual. I'm very purpose driven. I was going batshit crazy
Mhm,
because my kids are now at school. Like, I don't have them to, like, kind of appease my thoughts. Like, I had to sit in it and think about all those shitty thoughts and
mhm,
all that stuff. I had to sit in the weight of the emotions, and that's what I did. And my coach at the time encouraged me to journal, and I said this to him. I said, "Now, I had never been opposed to journaling. I had just never done it. Like, I see the value in it, and I just never took the time." And I said back to him when he encouraged me to journal, I said, "You just want me to write down all my shitty thoughts? That doesn't sound very fun, Jason." And
mhm,
he kind of chuckled and he's like, "Yeah, well, that's one way to put it." But he goes, "Let me put it to you this way." He's like, "You are never going to have these exact emotions again. Capture them and like work through it." And so there was a lot of nights, a lot of evenings that I would spend by my fire pit overlooking the golf course, a bourbon and a cigar in hand. And I'm very careful to say this. I didn't drown myself in a bottle. I was just kind of a habit to have one glass of bourbon and smoke a cigar and relax. So I was journaling, praying with God, actually working through it. And you get through the stages of grief and you get to acceptance. Now, what's next? Am I going to lay down and quit? Am I just going to take this buyout and not do anything? Am I going to take an offer from a different firm? You start to work through those questions. So
mhm,
one of the smartest things I did was create a T chart, and it didn't have numbers or pros and cons. What it had was I wrote on the left side of the piece of paper, what did I love about my previous world?
mhm,
And on the right side, what did I hate or dislike? And I made those lists. And then I asked myself a really important question at the bottom. I said, what if I could design a world where I only did the stuff that I love to do and eliminated or at least mitigated the stuff on the right side? And I started to work through that. I was like, all right, I love helping people build visions bigger than they think that for themselves. I love helping people solve issues. I love the entrepreneurial space. I love leadership. I love pouring into people, helping them continue to grow as a leader. And so I started to think about the coaching and developing and speaking
mhm,
and started to build a business plan around that. And
mhm,
then through that, I'm like, okay, my wife goes, "Yeah, I don't want you traveling all the time, though. We got 4 young kids."
mhm,
And so then, okay, go back to the drawing board. What if I bought a property that people could come see me instead of me having to travel all the time? And that's where the 80 acres and the farm came into play and started. I said, just send a realtor out, find me 80 to 100 acres. I want to build something special. And
mhm,
so it was getting through those stages of grief, kind of leaning into that fire and processing all the emotions to get
mhm.
to the other side where I could actually start visualizing again. So again, those 6 months, as much as brutal time period as it was a true blessing in disguise to be able to work through that process.
How strongly did you believe that things would go from, being in a really bad place to you were gonna reinvent yourself and, you were gonna be successful again, let's say?
Yeah, that's good. So one of the things that I kept leaning on, even early on, like even when the emotions were the rawest, I was like, God, you must have some big plan in store for me because I thought this was the big plan.
Mhm,
Right? I thought this was it. I thought this is what you put on my heart to do, and impact and build this and carry not only carry on my dad's legacy, but actually build it even larger. So I that was one thing I held on to was my faith, and my faith became even infinitely stronger through that, because what I saw was God wasn't like a lot of times I feel like we think like God's just up there and He's looking down over us.
mhm,
You get into that pit though, and you realize that God's not up there; He's actually right there with you.
mhm, mhm,
Now, he's walking with you the whole time. And he's not necessarily telling you what to do or how to do it or how to like he's just like you feel his loving presence in that pit of despair. That's one of the things I notice. Like a lot of times we have this fallacy, like God's up there in heaven and he's looking down over us, just like our loved ones that have passed before us. And it's like this novel idea. You don't realize that you carry the Holy Spirit inside you, and
mhm.
that Holy Spirit connects you to God. And when you're in that pit of despair, you're on your knees, like he's right there with you. And so
How did you know that you were gonna come out on the other end and be okay is really what it comes down to?
yeah. Oh, there's one other point I wanted to make is, and this is smart for like the first question, like when I got home that morning, when I got terminated at the Marriott, they didn't let me into my offices that I own 30,000 square feet on. 9 in the morning, my wife greets me at the door because it's really odd for me to be home at 9 in the morning. And I tell her I'm done. And she goes, "What are we gonna do?"
Mhm.
Right? Her like, she's stay-at-home mom of 4, like, her mind goes immediately like, "Are we gonna be okay?" So the point I'm trying to make here is that I was in the financial world, I was very good with our money, so I knew that we were gonna be okay financially, even though she may not have known that yet. And
Mhm.
so one thing I wanna implore all of you is, like, especially if you're a business owner, don't outspend your means, like, be smart with your money because you don't know what's gonna come around the next corner, right? So that was one thing I didn't have to worry about is not only was I okay in that 6 months because we were smart with our money, I knew there was a buyout coming after that negotiation concluded.
Mhm.
So we were gonna be okay. So that part was fine, where some people get into a position financially where they gotta make a quick move because they didn't set themselves up properly. Knowing that with the backdrop is like, I think so many people are scared to climb the mountain because they may fail, not realizing all the lessons that you learn climbing the mountain. And so over my almost 20 years in that business and building the business and building to that level that I got to, I learned how to sell. I learned how to recruit. I learned how to develop. I learned how to make or build an amazing culture. I learned how to run really strong financials, like all those things. Like I didn't forget any of that. Now
Mhm.
I have that foundation to build the next thing. Right. So the climbing the mountain, that journey prepared me for the next thing. And so, did I have a blueprint for the next thing? On how to exactly get there on what I was building? No. It's
Mhm.
just like any other entrepreneurial venture. When you start from zero, you're going to throw a lot of spaghetti against the wall and see what sticks. You're going to do it dumb till you can do it smart. And so
Mhm.
over the last 5 years, I've figured a lot of things out on how to do it smart. But I never will lose faith in God's plan. I will never lose faith in myself because, hey, God puts this vision on my heart. It's on me to put one foot in front of the other towards that vision. And
Uh,
if I take the wrong step, he's going to correct me
mhm.
and put me back on course. And
Mhm.
so it's the faith in God, it's the faith in yourself, and it's the self confidence and belief in all that you've learned and overcome to continue taking those steps.
So this was an incredibly disruptive point in your life. You had to jump back in the fire. You had to go and do this thing again. Are there places or are there places where you're more cautious now? You're more hesitant to say, hey, you know what, I don't want to because of my history, or are you, just straight balls to the wall at this point?
So I know how to identify narcissists a lot better.
Mm.
And I even help business owners that I work with some interview questions and screening questions because narcissists are brilliant people. They're chameleons. It can make you think that they're the best thing since sliced bread, and their true colors don't come out till 6 months, a year. In my case, 3 or 4 years before his true colors started coming out. So I've helped people in that regard, but I don't hold any ill will. Like it was interesting. About a year, I was still in that lawsuit. It took 2 years to resolve. About a year into that, my coach was sitting there going, "Josh, you've got a lot of empathy for this person that's done you wrong." And I was like, "Yeah, the Bible teaches us to forgive. Like, I'm not going to forget what he did. I'm not going to, for me to harbor resentment and ill will in my heart's only going to hurt me." And then he asked a really powerful question. He goes, "How you doing with you?" I go, "What do you mean?" He goes, "How you doing with empathy for yourself?"
Mhm.
And I just broke down. I was
Mhm.
like, "Not good." And so those are lessons that you learn too, right? Is like sometimes the hardest person to have empathy for or love for or even look in the mirror is yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
that's where you got to have some strong people in your corner that still continue to believe in you and remind you of who you are to step through that. So I don't think there's anything that there's no ill will I harbor towards him. Like I'm still a lover of people. I'm not cautious with people just because of what one person did to me. And there's been other people that have screwed me over in the past too. Different scenarios, much different scenarios. But like I'm not going to stop loving people. It's like the first girl in high school that breaks your heart, Rick. You're not gonna take a chance on another girl after that? Like, of course, right? Like, so that's what we gotta learn. Now you can learn and be better like I have with identifying narcissists and identifying, where I'm willing to go as far as boundaries with people and removing myself from situations and whatnot. Um, but yeah, I'm not gonna harbor any ill will towards people just because one person was that kinda evil towards me.
Yeah. 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 One thing you talked about was in that pit and God being with you. And I know that there's infinite value to that, but I'm wondering who are the other people that were around you that you were leaning into? You talked about Josh, you alluded to your wife. What was that circle like? What did you permit them to do in terms of helping you come back? And, what were those essential things that they poured into you?
So one of the hardest lessons, but also beautiful blessings that came out of this, like when you get knocked down from the mountaintop, especially as publicly and hard as I did, you get the hard lesson, but beautiful blessing of learning who was real in your life and who wasn't. Oftentimes, when you get to the top of the mountain, there's a lot of hanger-oners. Like imagine, excuse me, the NFL draft just happened. Think about all those watch parties, people, their family members, cousins, friends, agents, all these people that are now hanging on to this young millionaire. That person has no idea who really cares for them and who's just there because now they're in the NFL and now is going to be a millionaire at 22 years old, right? But when they suffer an injury, when they're no longer in the NFL, they'll find out real quick who was real in their life and who wasn't. And that's what I had the opportunity to learn as well. And so the people that were there for me, I will never forget. Like Jason, my coach, my wife, my parents, my mother-in-law, some really close friends, even people that, were previous just acquaintances
Mhm.
that saw what I went through and chose to get up again, that were inspired by me choosing to get up again instead of just taking the big buyout and go kind of hide for a
Yeah,
while. Like I'll never forget them. And I will also never forget the ones that claimed to be friends beforehand and weren't there for me in that pit.
yeah, yeah. What was that like when you found, like, people abandoning you?
I would love to say that I was surprised, but I wasn't.
Mhm,
Like, you always kinda have that feeling or know that gut feel of, either something's not just right or you're not willing to open yourself up entirely to an individual. Like,
mhm,
that's a yellow flag. We'll call that a yellow flag. They may not be real in your life because I think we can identify red flags and green flags pretty easily. I think it's the yellow flags that we struggle with,
mhm,
where we don't really know. So I wasn't surprised by I don't know, no one's popping to mind that I was truly surprised by that they weren't there for me in that time period.
mhm.
But what it did do is just go, okay, here's a clear line. They drew the line for me. Now I know where you stand, and I don't have to waste any time or energy towards you or this relationship.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Good stuff, good stuff. You talked about questioning your purpose when, everything started going south for you. First question is, how do you know what your purpose was?
Mhm. So you learn this through time, I think, over a period of you doing what you think you're supposed to be doing. So I'll back up to I was about 30. Yeah, I think I was 30 years old. I recruited a guy. I always wanted to recruit an individual that would challenge me. I'm a hyper competitive, played college football, always been an athlete. I love to compete. And I always wanted to recruit someone that would push me and
Mhm,
really try and push me to be my best. And I never had that until I recruited this guy named Carl. And he's become one of my greatest friends and business partners today. So he comes into the business and he just was so coachable and so just wanting to learn and soak it up and be successful that I would literally lie in bed on Sunday nights wondering because he was listening to everything I was saying. I was like, all right, how am I going to motivate this dude tomorrow, Monday morning when we meet? And you realize that that was forcing me to be a better leader. Like I was forced to level up my leadership game. And what I realized by year three, he not only pushed me, he started whooping my ass.
mhm,
Like he started running circles around me as far as like production was concerned.
mhm,
And I was never envious, never jealous. I was just proud.
mhm,
And in that moment, I started to realize I'm meant to be more of a leader than I am a producer. And so that was one of those hints or nudges that you go, okay, I get more joy out of leading and seeing others succeed than just building my own thing and seeing myself succeed. Now, someone else, because I also witness others get jealous of that getting beat type thing because they're a
mhm,
competitor and they just want to win. And that's okay too, but you're not meant for leadership then. You're meant to be that great salesperson. And so you get these nudges and you start to realize, and then you draw out these visions for yourself and you see things, especially if you're a visionary leader, and you're like, all right, I'm going all in on that. And again, God's going to correct you if you're not listening or not stepping in the right direction. But every step I took was towards this right direction, or at least what it felt like.
mhm,
And I would say probably over the 5 years of me, some of the situations that I went with now in hindsight being 2020, there was probably several nudges that God gave me that I was meant for something different
mhm,
that I wasn't listening to. And I often say this is like God whispers until you don't listen enough, he has to yell.
Mhm. Yeah.
And that was him ripping the rug out from underneath me and saying, "Hey, I got a different direction for you." I had to yell, "I'm sorry. This is gonna hurt." And that's what happened. And now what's been interesting, you get in hindsight and kinda emotion removed from that being in June will be 5-year anniversary, is my impact now. Like, I never would have written the book that I wrote. I never would have started these things. I never would have bought the land. Even and I could have afforded the land when I owned the firm, but it was never on the radar. And how many lives I've changed outside of the financial world is just exponential with entrepreneurs and other speaking engagements and stuff of that I've been blessed to be on stages for. Like, you get to the other side of it and you're like, "Ah, all right, God, I see what you're doing." But in the moment, it's like it was a brutal pain to go through.
Wow. 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 I think about, I remember having a conversation with a gentleman, and he was talking about brilliant, brilliant entrepreneur. And he's talking about not creating a business around your passion, but it sounds like that's exactly what you did, and you've been successful with it from what I can hear. Is that an accurate statement?
Yeah, you have to notice gaps in the marketplace. Like, it was interesting. I was having a conversation with a 25-year-old personal trainer of mine. There's several in the gym, and he was asking, he's like, "If you were to get into business today, what would you do?" And I said, I have a feeling behind that question. You're asking like, what type of industry or what type of business would I start? And he's like, "Yeah, would it be real estate? Would you do the financial thing again?" I said, "Well, that's a really hard question for me to answer for you." I was like, what I can answer is like, I pointed down at his shoes. I was like, you realize at some point we wore these things on our feet and they didn't have laces. And someone goes, there's got to be a better way to keep these on our feet. And they invented laces.
Hmm.
And then someone goes, "You know what? We could probably make these more comfortable." And then someone goes, "You know what? We could probably make these more fashionable." Like, they noticed gaps in the marketplace that they were passionate about, that
Hmm.
they were able to use their skill set, their God given unique gifts to create a solution. Because most oftentimes people are looking at business and you ask them, "What's the purpose of business?" They'll say, "To make money." I said,
Hmm.
"That's not right. The purpose of a business is to solve a problem. And if you do that well enough, as a byproduct, you'll make good money." So the purpose, I want everyone to be clear about that. If they think about and had that answer in their head as like the purpose of business is to make money, that's wrong. The purpose is to actually solve a problem. And if you solve that problem well enough, you will make a lot of money. And so the problem that I was seeing in the coaching space is that there's a lot of fake influencers out there that have never actually built a business, never been through the fires that I've been through, and are really good at marketing and selling funnels and courses. And I'm like, all right, well, if I can take my passion, my skill set, and my experience and actually be a real entrepreneur coaching real entrepreneurs, I can fulfill a need in the marketplace where I'm not just trying to pump the world full of more courses, but actually trying to have real change and to get into the weeds with these business owners and help them through the fires that they're going through. I can solve that and I can make a great living doing it.
Yeah. 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 Well, tell me a little bit about what you, or tell us, I should say, a little bit more about what you're doing now.
Yeah, so I'll say answer on the systems and processes side. That's an easier answer. I'm an EOS implementer. For those that may not know that terminology, it's entrepreneurial operating system, and it really comes in and helps an entrepreneur get the proper structure, get them all aligned on one vision, gain traction along with everyone in the organization rowing in the same direction, and create a healthy organization where you actually enjoy the work you're doing with the people you're doing the work with. So that's one area that I help when people say that systems and processes is more of their problem than the leadership side. On the leadership side, what I'm doing is I started this episode where we started talking about how a lot of times I find really successful entrepreneurs that are doing very well in business, but
Hmm.
their marriage is thinned. Their relationships with their kids have thinned. They may have an addiction that they're struggling with. Their relationship with God is gone because like the season of life they were in dictated that they had to focus everything on the business to get that going. And then all this other stuff that's the fruit of life, those relationships, your health, all that stuff is taking the back seat. And so what I've built out is a course and community. So it's not just selling a course, but building a community of like-minded entrepreneurs, putting them in 12-person cohorts and
Hmm.
actually creating a mastermind out of those where we're working through these issues, not just on the business side, because they're already successful in business, but like
Yeah.
the human side. Like,
Yeah.
how do we continue? Because my biggest thing is I was in that financial planning world for a long time. I delivered death claims from 2 years old to 90 years old. And we always studied the five regrets of the dying, and they changed a little bit every year, but the theme was always the same. They regret the actions they didn't take over the actions they did take. And so that being said, is like, how do we get to the end of our life and leave the legacy that we want to leave without the regrets of the dying, these five popular regrets? And so for me, it's like, all right, you've built a great business. Let's build a great life.
Yeah, that's so important. That's so important. Is that tell me how the Kairos code comes into that? Is that part of what you're training the people in?
Yeah, that's exactly it. So I wrote the book, The Kairos Code, all through my experiences of learning where I screwed up. So the moment I got terminated, and then they ship all my stuff from my office to the house. Remember, because they wouldn't let me in my office. They shipped the boxes to me. I couldn't open them for like 30 days. Like I couldn't face it. So one day I get the courage to go out down in the basement, open these boxes, and I have this huge epiphany as I'm opening them. All my trophies, accolades, accreditations, all the stuff that was in all my books, all the stuff that was in my office that made me seem or feel important.
Hmm.
I open these up and I'm going through it and I'm like, none of this shit matters. None of it matters, Rick. If I died today, this would just collect dust on a shelf, or my wife and kids would, have to do something with it. But or maybe they look at it and say, "Yeah, Dad was successful," or whatever. But like, I can't take it with me. None of it matters. But what did matter was that I had a loving wife that still loved me, my kids, and my relationship with them, my relationship with God, my health. Those were the things that mattered in that moment. And I
Hmm.
still had all that. So the moment that I thought I had nothing or lost everything, I really had everything. My relationship with God, my health, my wife, my kids.
Yeah.
Right. So, but how often do we give our family, our health, or a relationship with God our leftovers because we're so focused on the business? So, I built out the five bridges of Kairos and then I started going deep on it. So, I started over 2 years, built this curriculum out where I'm like, when we get into these cohorts, we're going to talk about the real shit. Like, we're going to talk about like actually fixing and working on the human. So, you show up your most authentic self and you're the greatest leader you can possibly be in your home, your
Hmm.
community, and your business, and not just your business, because you're not Rick at work and Rick at home. You got to be that aligned human. You're not two separate people. You don't need to wear these masks that we all wear or feel like we need to wear. And if we can just shed those and show up with our true light, that one unique light that God gave us and only us,
Hmm.
the world can change. Your world can change. Our world can change. The ripple effect will be massive. So it's all through me screwing up things. And thankfully, I didn't screw them up bad enough where I lost my wife or I lost my kids or I lost my health. But I screwed them up just enough to go when I went through all that and I started writing the book, or before I started writing the book, God told me these lessons weren't just for you. They were
Amazing.
for you to serve the world. And so that's where I said, because I never thought I'd be an author. Like I joke that if my English teachers were still alive, because I don't know if they are, they'd be shocked that I actually am a best-selling author. I never thought I'd write a book. And I did because God told me the lessons weren't for me. They're for everyone else.
Obedience is awesome. I love that. You mentioned the five bridges of Kairos. Can
Yeah.
you can you give us a little overview on that?
Yeah, so going back to that story of the boxes and realizing where I screwed it up, like our spiritual grounding is our foundation. And so I always tell people, like, I'm not a Bible thumper. You don't have to believe what I believe. I believe in Jesus. I'm a Christian, but you don't have to believe what I believe. But we've all been to a funeral, a wake, a visitation, and we've seen the body there and the spirit gone. And so you got to know that we're spiritual beings, we're energetic beings. And so whatever your spiritual founding is, your foundation, like that is it. You have to be right. For me, it's being right with God before anything else. And then from there, we go to the internal bridge. The internal bridge is your mental, your emotional, and your physical health. Because just like when we go on an airplane, flight attendants tell us the same thing every time. Put your oxygen mask on first before assisting others. Why? Because if you're passed out or dead, you can't help anyone else. So same thing. If you're not focused on what you think to be selfish or what others might call selfish, if you're not focused on your physical health, your mental health, your emotional health, you can't be the best for others. And so that's why that comes second. And then relationships comes third. This is the fruit of life right here, right? So my order for relationships is God first, yourself second, your spouse if you have one, your kids if you have them, and then everyone else. And your job is to not screw up that order. But again, those first three bridges were the things that I was leaving the leftovers for while focusing everything on work. So the bridge everyone likes to skip to is environment, which is bridge four. This is the one we like because we're taught to be providers. We gotta make enough money to live a lifestyle and all that different stuff. And then we get trapped in that and what we are. And that's where our identity gets trapped. So, like you said earlier, when you lose your identity, well, your work should just be a piece of your identity, not your entire identity. So that when you go through these losses, you'd be like, all right, I was the managing partner of this large financial firm, but that was just a piece of who I was. That didn't take away that I'm a child of God, that I'm a husband, I'm a father, I'm an athlete, I'm a leader, I'm all these other puzzle pieces put together, right? And this is what high level athletes go through this all the time. Get out of the NFL. Well, I was this NFL athlete. Who am I now? Well, you weren't just that NFL athlete. What are all the attributes that comprised you getting there? The work ethic, the determination, the grit, the teamwork. That's who you are, not just an NFL athlete. So environment bridge is crucial to life. That's where a lot of your purpose will come from. That being said, it can't be the bridge that we skip to and skip all the others. And then if we get the first four right, we move to legacy bridge, which is bridge five. And the two things people get wrong about legacy is they think it's going to be 30 years from today.
Hmm.
It's going to be someday down the road that I'm going to leave a legacy.
Hmm.
And then the other thing they get wrong is they think it's about the stuff that I'm going to leave behind, right? So remember the boxes, none of that shit my wife and kids were really going to care about. You've never seen a U-Haul following a hearse. Can't take it with you. So that being said, is it's not what you leave behind; it's what you leave in others that's part of your legacy. And your legacy is built every single moment of every day, not 30 years from today. It's in every interaction that you're having with a human being. It's every action you take or every action you don't take. That's building your legacy, and it's happening right here, right now. You're just not cognizant of it.
Yeah, good stuff. Good stuff. I love that. I love that. I love that. Wish I had more time to dive into this, but we are running out of time. What I want to do is I have a question I ask each of my guests. And name of the show, obviously, is the Relentless Pursuit of Winning podcast. You know, as an athlete, as a business person, winning is something that you define probably pretty easy. You see goals like, this is what I want. The difficulty a lot of people have is maintaining that relentless pursuit. So my question for you is, how would you recommend, how would you advise someone to maintain that relentless pursuit towards whatever they're defining as winning?
I think that John Wooden, Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan have defined it the best. It's being brilliant at the basics and never getting bored with it and continuing to have what I call a Kanai mindset, a continuous and never ending improvement mindset. Is
Mm,
that being humble. So it's funny, like you think about think about someone really brash. Michael Jordan, like people know about him, but let's go Conor McGregor. Brash attitude. You either love the dude or hate the dude.
hmm
If I ask someone, not you, Rick, because I know you'd know the answer, but if I asked someone said, "Do you think Conor McGregor's humble?" They'd be like, "Oh, fuck no." Like, you hear that guy talk? I said, "Okay, let me pivot the question. How hard do you think that dude had to work to get to the spot that he's in? How many coaches do you think he had to listen to? How many times did he get yelled at in training? How many times do you think he got beat in training to keep getting up again to get to where he's at? And does that require humility?
mm,
It
yeah.
absolutely does. So whatever his persona is that he puts out there, because that also made him a multi-millionaire, he had a shit ton of humility to get to where he was at. So I think there's a combination of being brilliant at the basics, never getting bored with them, Kanai mindset, and humility that really can take you a long way.
Mm,
And I also
mm,
want to say this because relentless pursuit. So I took this assessment from positiveintelligence.com. Brilliant book, by the way, by Shirzad Shamin, Positive Intelligence. And you can take this assessment and it tells you how much percentage of there's two assessments actually. One tells you how much percentage of your time your brain is working for you versus against you. And then it tells you your 9 saboteurs or accomplice saboteurs. And one of those, and one of my highest, was hyper competitive. Former athlete, entrepreneur, like that makes sense. So you think you might go, okay, well, what's wrong with being competitive? Nothing is
mm,
wrong with being competitive. It's being hyper competitive when you're only placing your value and your worth on
mm.
winning. That's the problem. Being competitive, there is nothing wrong with that. But when you place your identity, your value, or your worth all in winning, there's a big problem with that.
Yeah, I agree with that. 100%, 100%, 100%. Um, if someone wants to get in touch with you, learn about how to work with you, what's the best way to do that?
Easiest way, at Josh Kosnick on any socials. I'm in control of my socials and respond. But also joshkosnick.com is a great SEO. I've never met another Josh Kosnick to this point, so you can find me pretty easily. And the entrepreneur cohorts that we run, lqblueprint.com, it's Life Quotient. think IQ, EQ. I went with LQ, the life quotient. So LQ blueprint for the entrepreneurs out there that may want to know more about that program and live in a great life outside of their business as well as inside.
Fantastic. And you have an assessment you want to tell our audience about?
Yep. So on joshkosnick.com, you can actually, there will be a pop up there. It's a free assessment. It's called the LQ assessment, like the LQ blueprint. But the LQ assessment will grade you on those 5 bridges. They give you a total score, and then it'll tell you what your scores on each of those 5 bridges. And it's just a benchmark to see where you're kind of lagging in life right now, which bridge or which area you need to start working on. It gives you you got to be honest with it because it's subjective, right? So it's not scientifically based because it's truly coming from you. But if you do that and you actually start to take some steps towards closing those gaps, you can take that assessment over and over again to see how you're improving.
And the Kairos code, is that something we can get on Amazon or anywhere?
Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and within the next 30 days, it will be on Audible. I recorded that myself. It was too personal of a book, so I had to read it. I didn't want a voice actor doing that. So Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and then in the next 30 days, it'll be on Audible.
Amazing, 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 Josh. This has been a great conversation. Thank you so much. It's really touched me personally as well. So I think
I appreciate it. This has been a great conversation, Russ. Appreciate you having me.
absolutely, absolutely. And folks, thank you so much for watching or listening to another episode of the Relentless Pursuit of Winning podcast. Catch you next time.